unless you've had $100,000 payroll and the 100,000's not in the bank, you don't know what being an entrepreneur is. There's no such thing as work-life balance. Most people plan their next vacation way better than they plan the rest of their life. And they say to themselves, what happened?
So I just thought that a great place for us to start is, as I mentioned before, is looking at this article about entrepreneurship and business. There's so many different pieces of information out there about entrepreneurship, and I don't know what's true and what's false. So it's great for me to have two entrepreneurs here to be able to look at a piece of information and to see, is this information valid or not valid? So let me do this. Let me share the screen really quick, and I'm going to show you this article that I found on Forbes. So you gentlemen can see this really quick. As you can see here, it's titled How to Break Through the 1 Million Barrier Mark. And I want to go down here and just let you scale these 6 steps that it has. It has invest in financial education, adopt value-based pricing, delegate and outsource, build a powerful network, embrace risk and think bigger. Last one here, focus on scalability. Question for you both. Do you feel that's valid or invalid, or there's something missing from that list? And Tony, whomever wants to start first can take that question.
I think they're all valid. I think those are valid points. I mean, they can be elaborated in a million different directions, but I think a lot of that is valid. It has a lot to do with the person, what their strong suits are, and the industries that they're in. Different industries require different keys to succeed. They're not all the same. Different people have different lanes. You need to understand that, what you're good at and what you're not.
Your industry, facilities maintenance. What is facilities maintenance? How did you go? Because I looked at some of your LinkedIn. How did you get into this industry? What drew you to this industry of all the different industries that are out there?
So, as I'm sure you already know, Jason and I are brothers. We come from a real estate background. We always struggled to find contractors and workers companies that would do what they said they were going to do for a reasonable price, show up on time and just follow through. So at one point, years ago, we decided to do that ourselves. Went out and bought a small commercial landscape company. Always been systems-oriented guys. Applied our same metrics, disciplines, whatever you want to call it, and it worked. And we did it again and again and again. And I think now we're up to 12 acquisitions over the past 10 years.
Right. So that first one, and Jason, I heard you speak about this but that was the Perry's Landscaping?
Yes.
All right. So my question there, these deals, your first one, you said your applied systems. What year was this? 2000, right after recession, 2008, if I remember correctly, around that time?
I want to say 9, 10.
Okay.
Around there. It was towards the beginning of the financial crisis. It was already bad times.
Okay. So was that a strategic move because of the situation?
No. So at that time, our thought process was, like I said, it was towards the beginning of the crisis. So it was going to be a little bit of time before real estate was investable again. We were looking for something to compensate and add to what we were doing. So we decided to look at at everything, all the services we were paying for at the time, and see which one of those we could transition in-house, give that some mass rapidly in order to make it worth our while. So we started taking care of our own lawn maintenance at all of our properties. We purchased Perry's, started doing that, through Perry's originally for other companies, got into it, got our feet wet with that, and then noticed that it was doable. And, for the most part, in smaller companies, there's not a whole lot of processes and systems and, organization, hardworking people. The owner is the everything to everyone. And so when you start implementing some of those, you can see the results, rather quickly.
I don't know if you gentlemen know, there's a lady, entrepreneur that I follow. Her name is Cody Sanchez, and she talks about boring businesses and just what you spoke of, Jason, in regards to buying some of these businesses that don't really have many systems, much tech involved in there, and turning them around. And one of the things she talks about is, you can implement systems, implement that, but the people are going to be there. The people that are going to run it are the most important part. So oftentimes the owner doesn't stay. So when you're looking at a business, is it a thought, like a future thought, to think about who's going to be my operator going forward because the owner's going to stay, or you're making a deal with the owner expecting to? Can you talk through it about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, that's always different in every single case. most of the time that depends on the size of the organization you're acquiring. The larger that organization, the more employees they'll have, the more systems they'll have in place. The smaller it is, the less. I mean, that's a pretty simple, all of the above. So if they're very small, there's not a lot of systems in place, and you're going to have to typically, for the most part, the owner will stay on for a certain period of time that you've negotiated prior to your closing. After that, again, for the most part, there's always unique situations, but typically the owner has a shelf life at the business that's not his or hers anymore, right? Because you're changing some things around, looking at things a little bit differently. They typically, again, not all the time. We've had some that have stayed with us long term, but they had a different mindset. But for the most part, they have a shelf life, and I don't, mean that in a bad way, but they do, because you're changing and evolving their baby, what they created, what they had their times with, and breakthroughs, etc. So that's a little difficult for most people to handle. So that's basically it. We look at it that way. If it's a small organization, for the most part, we're going to tuck it into a bigger organization, capabilities to manage all of their things that currently the owner's doing. For example, payroll, receivables, billing, stuff like that, which oftentimes we see a lot of owners that are backed up on invoice customers, which is the last thing you should be backed up on, because that's the lifeblood of the business and the main reason that most businesses don't succeed. So things like that. If it's a larger organization, we look at it a little bit differently, and it might be a standalone or a platform organization. And then that's a little bit different. You start getting your feet wet in how their systems and their processes, and then start tweaking those little by little, implementing your own. Obviously, the speed of that depends on the organization and who and what you're working with, type of industry, etc.
I want to say this acquisition space is so interesting to me, and I'm trying to understand it for myself. But before we get too far, there was something that I heard one podcast you did, and I want to come to Tony, because you mentioned these words in 2008 when you were going through this dip. You said, make mention of something of skills that you learned when you were going through that process of the recession. You could have learned more, something like you compared learning what you've learned you wouldn't have learned at Harvard. You remember making that statement?
Oh yeah, I say it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to know I was so curious what were the skill sets that were learned in that period of time?
It's the school of hard knocks, man. When it hurts your pocket and there's too much month at the end of the money, that's when you figure things out. A lot of very successful business people have a famous line that says, "Unless you've had $100,000 payroll and the 100,000's not in the bank, you don't know what being an entrepreneur is." And I think that's very true. There's no such thing as work-life balance, right? What you learn in school is not the way it works. Harvard doesn't teach that to you. Right? Why is it the guy that's teaching the course at Harvard never had a business, never had a payroll? Yeah, he can teach you what's in books, but boots on the ground, employees not showing up, checks bouncing, not enough money in the bank, insurance rates going up, fuel going up. I mean, when you're faced with that and you've put your life into this business and everything's going backwards, that's when you learn. When you have no other choice but to figure it out and just truly think of options and angles that you can have. Those situations force you to grow. And for me, and I think I speak for Jason as well, those were probably the toughest 3 to 5 years of my life.
Of course, there's a lot of things, but is there one skill above all those things that you can say of those 3 to 5 years, this was the skill set that I had developed that got me through to the other side?
There's probably 2 or 3 things I tell myself all the time. One, and they're not my lines. I didn't make them up. I just tell myself I own them. Success is not a destination. It is simply what you attract by the person you become. The answers are always in the mirror. Don't look too far, right? Most people say, well, this happened to me. That's why I haven't been able to. Well, if I was 6 inches taller, then maybe I would have been able to do it. Well, if I was skinny, or if I had a better dad or a better mom, or a number of different reasons. I call that looking on the outside. You got to look in the inside. The answers are all within you. Those two, and I often tell myself, the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? In this country, everything's available. The only reason you're not making it is because you don't want it bad enough. You never hear of anybody saying, man, if I could only get to Somalia, everything would be okay. I mean, nobody says that. Everybody wants to come here. We're here. What are we doing about it? then people tell you, hey, I need work-life balance and this and that and all this other BS. And if that's the way you think, which is fine, and I respect that, then you shouldn't be in business because it's not going to work out, because there is no thing as work-life balance. Jack Welch, you know who Jack Welch is? He says it best, right? There's no such thing as work-life balance. There are work-life choices, and we all pay a price for it. You want a good wife? There's a price to pay. You want good kids? There's a price to pay. You want to be financially stable? There's a price to pay. Nothing's free. There's no free lunch. I mean, lately in this country, some things are free, but it shouldn't be that way. He who busts his ass succeeds in anything, right? You got to push through things. And I think, not to go off on an angle, but it's not supposed to be easy, man. People have this perception that, hey, man, when I get to a certain place, everything's going to work and things are going to be perfect. And I'm never going to argue with my wife anymore. And my kids are going to listen all the time. And I'm just going to get clients every day. I mean, it's not that way. It's tough. The rewards are exponential, but it's tough, man. And it's not for everybody. You need to realize, if you're looking to do something like this, do you really want? Are you willing to pay the price? If you are, great, go get it. It's the best place to do it. But if you're not, find a really, really good job with someone who appreciates you and be the best you can be there. If entrepreneurship is not for you, those are my best suggestions, man. You need to understand, whoever it may be.
And that's valuable. Like you said, yeah, marriage is not easy. Anything's easy. My dad's been married for 60 years. Yeah, I got that. I definitely got that lesson as well growing up. So it was a great one. I'm one of 9 too. So I understand that aspect. Getting back to the deal making aspect, Jason, you mentioned for someone, say a small business owner, and I know when you did the Painters on Demand deal, you mentioned, I know you went around and around about for a little time, because I think that gentleman hadn't done a deal yet. You did about 7 at that moment. I want to know, what does a good deal look like? Like, I'm trying to look at a deal. I know industry knowledge. You gotta have the industry knowledge, of course, of your specific industry. Going in, kind of what you're looking for. Like, talk to me about conversation terms. What are you talking to them? What skill sets do we need to have to pull off a deal, like any deal of any size?
So number one, most people would think that price is the most important thing. And oftentimes it is for the sellers, but not for a savvy buyer. There are a lot of other things that are more important than that. We look for, obviously, vertical integration with the organizations we already have. We look for the type of systems and procedures they currently have in place. Is it a standalone platform or not? Financeability, of the project. Are there books in order? Are there things in order? Is this a real company, or is this a job that somebody owns? That's not a real one. So there's a variety of factors. Key employees at the organization, key customers at the organization, their receivables, what type of assets they have, if that type of organization actually has hard assets. There's a lot of different things that we're looking at when we're looking at a specific organization to acquire. How does it piece in with what we're currently doing and the direction we're going? So those are equally or more important than price. Oftentimes for the seller, especially in the smaller organizations, their price is directly, unfortunately, related to what they think they need to live out the rest of their life, or to retire, or they're very emotionally connected to this business, especially if it's something they started from the ground up. Even if it may not be very far up, they started it, they went through the struggles, they had their child in a crib in the corner of that office while all these things. So it's very emotional for them, and they may be completely off on what the organization is actually worth. Sometimes they may have interacted with a business broker or with somebody that gave them this, these false expectations from the get-go, and now they're, stuck on that, or they're not in tune with the current environment, not necessarily taking into account that interest rates have doubled or tripled in the last, 18 months. There's a lot of that happens.
I think it's got everything to do with 2 things. Really, do you have a motivated seller, someone who really wants to sell their business, or are they just fishing? 1. And 2, does cash flow cover debt service? And if you don't understand what that means, and I'm not speaking to you, I'm speaking to the people listening. If you don't understand what that means, you need to. Does whatever you're going to loan or service on that debt get covered by cash flow? And if it doesn't, then it doesn't work. Irrelevant of what the price is, right? Cash flow's got to cover debt service. You find a lot of people that say they want to sell the business until they're ready to sell it. And then they're not. They haven't looked into tax consequences or a number of different things post close. That happened. The first thing you have to do is find out if this person's serious about selling the business, right? What is it they want out of the deal? Do they want to continue to work? How much money do they want? How are they willing to take the money? Do they want a check? A number of different things, which is your initial preliminary due diligence, for lack of a better term.
So, as you mentioned, what does the seller want out of the deal? First step, understanding that, and that's the motivation that I'm assuming you find that, and you kind of work backwards from there.
Included in that is, why does the seller want to sell? Especially on the lower end, there's a lot of people that want to sell just because things aren't going well. That's not the best time for them to sell. Intuitively, they think when things are going well, why would I sell this? Let me just, ride this gravy train. I'm making money, etc. And when things are bad, they want to sell, similar to the stock market. I mean, it's pretty simple. You buy low, you sell high. Well, more often than not, people do the opposite. And the same thing happens with smaller organizations more often.
Funny, I recently just spoke with my last interview I did. I spoke with a guy who's 24. He sold his company, company was not profitable. And I know a lot of times in big tech, I'm in tech, Silicon Valley, oftentimes they might buy a company because they have a great engineering team or they have some type of great software, whatever that they're looking to capture. So they buy the company even though it's not profitable. Do you look at businesses like that, or does everything need to be profitable before you even take a look at it?
We're not in the tech industry, man. It's got to make money.
Right.
This is not a nonprofit, and it's not a secret, right? For us to be able to service clients and provide them with the type of services that they want, we got to be profitable. Not every job's for us. There are certain jobs that we pass up because it's just not our lane.
All right. So what I'm looking at here right now is knowing what the seller wants, what they want out of the deal, why are they willing to sell, and then once we understand that, I'm assuming now, are we getting to the point where we're talking terms, like we're talking money, or we're not there yet?
So there's a handful of flags that show up, right? So I come to you and you're telling me that you sell $1 million a year in X service, whatever that might be. Colby, show me your tax returns for the last 3 years showing that you do sell $1 million. And you say to me, well, it's actually like 600, but I get some cash and I give this and that, and that's a flag. You can only account for what the IRS knows about, right? If they don't know, a bank doesn't care, and no lending institution is going to care, right? So that flag, you got to find out that what they're telling you is essentially true for the most part. What do they want out of the deal? How much they want? And how they want to get paid. There are a number of strategic angles from tax consequences, both for the buyer and the seller, on how to structure deals correctly, right? Does the owner finance part of the deal? Does he not finance part of the deal? How much you allocate to different sectors of the business? Do they have equipment? What's the value you put on the equipment? There's a number of different things need to be looked at to structure the deal correctly. And my suggestion is you don't use your cousin that's an accountant or your friend who's an attorney. You use a true professional and pay them for their services to guide you correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So when you say I'm professional, like, okay, where I'm trying to get to is, say, for instance, me, I love this space of acquisition. It's always interesting. And I'm big on skill set, determining, because if I have skill set, okay, that's one thing, but I need the practical application. So when you say hire someone, you're saying like a business mentor or someone to vet the deal, you need several individuals that need to be part of the deal, like an accountant. So who are the people that need to be there? Who should I get?
So you need a real accountant, right? A CPA, a real accountant, a real attorney, right? Accountant.
Okay.
And by real, somebody that has done acquisitions, has actually transacted. There's plenty of real accountants that file individuals' tax returns every year. That's not what you're looking for. Great person, that's what they do. That's their space. You want to hire somebody. Most of the time, you're going to believe they're probably too expensive. That's when it's kind of right. You want to hire someone that actually does this and that is actually used to looking at these sorts of transactions.
And when you think it's expensive, what's really expensive is not doing it. And simply look at it as an insurance policy, right? A good accountant, a good lawyer, those are insurance policies. You need those things.
So how did you two, like, going getting Perry's? That's your first one. No experience in acquisition. Did you have a business mentor that you tagged along with that showed you all the ropes? How did you pick up these skill sets along the way to know all this?
Well, we didn't necessarily have experience in business acquisition, but we had acquired many pieces of real estate at different levels,
Okay.
right? So we weren't, blind going in, and again, Perry's was a small transaction. Perry's wouldn't have put us under if it didn't work out.
Okay.
And we had a very good understanding of a lot of things. We were already doing that for ourselves as far as the service. So that's a little bit different.
Okay.
And we've always been students, man. What you're doing here, part of the reason we're doing this with you is because we listen to podcasts all the time and learn from other people. So to answer your second question, yes, we've listened to books and read books and podcasts and videos on a number of different people.
That was actually one of the things that I was thinking to myself when you asked Tony about the skill sets needed. Being a student and being genuinely interested in what you're doing, right? If you're more interested in football statistics and what's going to happen on Sunday than you are in your business, and you're spending more time on that and fantasy football and whatever the case, again, nothing wrong with any of that. Football's good.
Exactly.
Right? But if you're more interested in that and you dedicate more time to that than learning about what puts food on your table, there's an issue there, and it's going to show very quickly.
Most people, Colby, plan their next vacation way better than they plan the rest of their lives. And then they get there and they say to themselves, what happened? How did I get here? Well, guess what, man? You didn't have a plan. So you fell into somebody else's plan. Guess what they had planned for you? Not much. Not much. You need to live life and do these things on purpose. This is not by chance. This is by choice. You need to know what you want, design it, even if it's not clear and you don't understand how you're going to get there. Do you actually think that Jeff Bezos knew exactly what Amazon's going to look like 20 years ago? I'm here to tell you he didn't. He had some sort of idea. He had the drive and the willingness to learn and expand and take risks, et cetera, but he didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. He doesn't know what it's going to look like 10 years from now. But he's in a lane that's pushing forward no matter what. That mindset, that drive to succeed at whatever it is you do is unique, and not everybody's willing to take it on. It's tough. It's possible, but it's tough.
It's one of the things I've learned too, as far as reading books. I know you listen to Dan Pena a lot. I listen to Tony Robbins has always resonated for me because he talks a lot about the psychology of business. Psychology, 80% business is 80% psychology, 20% skill. And a lot of people are not conditioned to be in business. They just don't have the mindset for it. I think it takes a certain condition type of person to be in business. And a lot of people just don't have a psychology for it. So that's why I really listen to a lot of him, because he really trains on the psychology aspect. I know we're coming up here on time. I want to be respectable, but I do want to talk one last question around, AI and stuff coming in, especially when you talk about businesses now. Are you doing anything, implementing any type of AI into your business? And do you feel like that's going to have an impact and can scale up your business down the road?
I'm good, man. My best suggestion, and we got a handful of people that we work with and mentor and try to help out young kids. We do some work with schools and things like that. My best advice to people is understand what you really want, man. And when you do that, if value's clear, the price is easy. If you know what you want, getting there is easier, right? But you got to know what you want. because that's what's going to drive you in the tough moments, man. You just can't do this haphazard. Yeah, that sounds good. Let me see if I go buy a business. Yeah, man, why not? Right? That never works. You have to do things with purpose. Surround yourself with people of value. If you show me your friends, I'll show you your future, right? You spoke about Dan Pena. That's one of the things he says, right? He's not for everybody. I happen to love the guy. I think he's great. You are who you hang around with, man, and find people of value, spend time with them, learn from them. It's crazy how willing to teach teachers are. The right student. Does that make sense? And you got to ask for things, man. You'll never get what you don't ask for. Ask for help, ask for advice. People are willing to give you more information sometimes than you think. But if you don't ask, it's not going to happen. So go get it. Whoever it is watching this, if you really want it, go get it, man. Just go get it. It's possible.